So for those who do not know CT, we thought it would be good for us to introduce what Culture Tree is to you briefly. So Culture Tree was founded in 2015, and our mission is to preserve and promote African languages and culture in the hearts and minds of adults and children across the world. We're all about empowering people to develop their personal and authentic expression of their own unique culture within their country of residence. Our services are Culture Tree Academy, so we run online classes teaching children and adults. We have Culture Tree TV YouTube channel, where we hope to have educational material teaching children African languages. We have Yoruba at the moment, but we plan to expand into other languages. We have Culture Tree events, which is part of what we do is thought leadership, one of the events that we're doing today, and also cultural events that we run in London. So after today, please check out our website, www.culturetree.co.uk. We're also on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Our handle is @culturetree. So now on to the webinar. The intent and the purpose of this webinar is to have a very frank and open exploration of the issues that we've mentioned, you know, in terms of raising rooted children. And we want everyone to have a chance to engage with this topic. So today's webinar is going to be for 90 minutes. We'll have a 45-minute panel discussion, and then we'll open up the door for questions and answers to our panel. So a few points to note: this has been recorded. Everyone should be on mute. If you're not on mute, please mute yourself. There's a chat section. Please feel free to put anything that if anything comes to your mind while we're having this discussion, there's a chat option there. Please use your registered name. So please make sure you put your name as you registered on the platform on Eventbrite on the notes there, so we know who joined us as well. So please keep the answers to the end. We're going to do a question and answer there. And if you have any questions at the end, please raise your hand or use the option. There's a raise hand option on there. Please use that. And then we'll select who we want to ask the question. So Amelia will be selecting a few people to ask questions. We'll try to get through as much as we can. So now, without further ado, let's get started.
Great. So thanks, Baimi. A brief reminder of what today is all about. So it's the first part of our three-part series titled Raising Rooted Children. And our topic for today is, who am I? Where do I belong? And why should I bother to embrace my culture? And I believe that those topics are quite close to all our hearts, given that we joined at 6 p.m. on a Friday. Kicking off the conversation with us today, we've got three distinguished panelists. We've got Tunde Kelani, also known as TK. We have Professor Zuhua, and we also have with us Ukamaka Olisakwe. I'll ask them to introduce themselves individually to you. Just a brief intro of kind of who they are and kind of what they do. So starting with Zuhua, why don't you kick off?
Hi, hello from London. I'm delighted to meet all of you and hope you're well. I'm Professor of Educational Linguistics based in University of Birmingham, UK, and the Director for Mosaic Research Center for Multilingualism. And I think also relevant for tonight's seminar is I speak Chinese as a mother tongue, and I'm mother of two multilingual children.
Okay, Uka.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Ukamaka Olisakwe. I am currently living in Vermont in the United States. I am a writer and a screenwriter also. And currently I am a doctoral candidate at the University of South Dakota, where I'll pursue a Doctor of Philosophy in English with a specialization in creative writing. And relevant to today's conversation, my current project, I'm exploring Igbo cosmology, Igbo origin stories, and how this is in conflict, constant conflict with Christianity, in southeastern Nigeria.
Okay.
So, and also I'm a mother of 3 children, so which is relevant to the conversation. Thank you.
Great, and we'll talk more about that shortly. And then we've got TK.
Oh, hello everyone. I'm excited to be in this webinar, and for me, the excitement is that as someone who has experienced from oral tradition throughout the media and now to this webinar in my lifetime, it's amazing. You know, I'm Yoruba. I was born in Lagos. It was the capital of Nigeria at that time. But I grew up at Abeokuta. My father sent me to live with my grandfather when I was 5 years old. So it gave me the opportunity to get into the community and at first hand experience the rich cultural heritage of the Yoruba people. I started education in Yoruba, discovered Yoruba literature, and then Yoruba theater, traditional theater, and then Yoruba music, Yoruba philosophy, you know, everything about Yoruba. And of course, I took to photography, and then I went to television, and then went to London Film School, and I used the medium of film for my cultural experience. I share my cultural experience, and I work in literature, history, preservation, sustainable development goals. So my lifetime has been around development of technology from oral tradition to social media.
Wow. Well, fantastic introduction. Thanks very much. We're really pleased to have you, all three of you here with us today. So we're just going to go straight into it. You know, I think we want to make make good use of the time that we've got. So we'll just start with questions. And I think Zuhra, when we look at our topic, you know, it starts with, you know, who are we and where do we belong? And as you know, many of us in the UK, we're often asked the question, where are you from? When I was growing up in Lagos, that was, you know, straightforward answer. My name is Buki, I'm from Ado-Ekiti, I live in Ogudu, and I'm Yoruba. Straightforward question. But when you're in the UK, I think coming into the UK, I realized that it's quite a loaded question, because when someone asks me that question, they're not trying to understand where I'm from. They're trying to understand, you know, who am I and where do I belong and what's my right to be here? So I think from your perspective, you know, where do we belong? And especially where we're bilingual, multiracial, and living outside a country that is not our country of birth. You know, where do we belong?
Well, this is a very interesting opening question. And
yes.
It's actually made me think about our identities are often indexed or marked by our place of origins, where we come from, and language we speak, and sometimes the accent we speak. And I think and our skin color as well. See, all these are like visible markers that people sometimes use to figure out who you are. And these seem to be very important when we meet people on the street. For example, you get into taxi driver may ask you, where are you from? But as somebody growing up in China and spending the last 20 years in the UK and travels and lived in the different parts of the world, I found this is actually a really difficult question to answer. And for example, if I say I'm from China, people will say, well, English is so good. And if I say I live in London, they will say, so where are you really from? So yes, that's the question, really from. So in my own work, I'm delighted you asked this question, because in my own work, I actually look at these discourse, and I call these conversation as nationality and ethnicity talk. So these are kind of a conversation that often go back and refers to one's ethnicity or nationality, either indirectly or directly. I mean, so apart from these questions, sometimes people will comment, when are you going home, going back home? And I think that's another tricky question. I think some of the audience participants are nodding. And it's these kind of comments or questions and frequently incur in small talks, in a conversation chat, but they are actually used to establish, ascribe, and challenge the ownership, where we belong to, and the legitimacy of our sort of presence in our in where we are. And I found one of in my research, I actually find very struck by somebody's answer. And this is somebody actually I admire. Her name is Taya Salasa. I don't know whether you have heard her name before. She's a British-American writer and original from Nigeria and Ghanaian origin. And she actually spoke about this question. And the answer she often say when she was actually talking about this question is actually, don't ask me where I'm from. I'm local. I'm local for Accra, Berlin, New York, and Roma. So these are places she has actually lived before. And I thought that's wonderful answer to these questions.
So for the lady you mentioned then, it's about where she has lived and has kind of had a lived experience. But as you said, that's a very, very complex question.
It is.
Well, it's a loaded question as well, isn't it? I guess for you, TK, that when you listen to that question, well, I guess one, is it a question you're familiar with from in a Nigerian context? And where would you say we're from and where we belong?
Well, for me, there's no mistaking where I'm from, because I speak not just the language, I dress it, I eat it, and everybody knows how I will be dressed at any particular time. And for me, the consciousness, the awareness came to me very early in life, because I told you I was ejected from my mother at age 5 to live with my grandfather in the family compound. And once I got there, everybody has stories to tell me. They told me stories about witches, about spirits in the forests, about the environment. I was scared. There was no electricity at that time. And in time, I started education in the Yoruba language and discovered the world of one of our celebrated writers, Gio Fagunwa. You know, his 5 books really, inspired me a lot. And when I started, English was introduced, and when it's a bit of English literature, I was able to compare Greek mythology, those great Greek stories, to the Yoruba gods and deities that they told me about. So for me, I started to realize that there was more to language and culture and just not identity. It ties to our intangible heritage in the sense that we have neglected those things. And it's about development. It's about the development of the people. It's about the development of Africa, because if we do not perhaps start the process of orientation to rediscover all the treasure that we have, it is not just a physical structure like oil and gas and so on. It is the closest to the people in terms of development. So for me, it's the more I go into, the more I discover the treasure trove that we have in our language and culture. And this is what anchors us to the people and to the issue of development. So for me, it is quite, it's natural, it's a way of life. And the more I discover it, the more I found out that, hey, listen, this is our future. Really, our future is in our past. The more we discover about everything and return, then that is the currency to our development.
Okay. So what you're saying there really is that your sense of belonging is tied to being Yoruba, right? And your cultural heritage, so to speak. So on the one hand, we've got Zuhur saying she takes inspiration from that quote about, it being where you've had most of your lived experience. For you, it's about your cultural heritage, which is also kind of slightly different perspectives on the same question. What of you, Uka? What are your thoughts?
For me, I would say it took me 36 years for me to be able to articulate where I am from. It took me coming to the United States for me to realize that I am not just the Igbo girl from southeastern Nigeria. So, and having lived here for 2 years, I realize now that my identity, it's almost like I now see it as a sort of Venn diagram with the three overlapping circles, So each circle represents something else. Like each circle would be Christian, I'm the Christian woman. The other circle would be I am the Nigerian woman. And the third circle would be I am the Black woman. And where all those circles overlap, at the intersection, at the middle of it, you find the Igbo woman. So, and then I am able to articulate this or say, this is who I am, depending on where I find myself. Depending on where I find myself, I'll be able to tell you which particular space I inhabit at that moment. In Nigeria, growing up in my family, they call me Wanyocha. Wanyocha simply means light-skinned woman. you know.
Well, okay.
But yeah, I'm in my family in southeastern Nigeria, I'm considered light skinned. But then I came to the United States, I realized I'm blackety black, like I'm so black that. So light skin doesn't even come to it. Light skin means something entirely different here.
Sure.
But then, yeah, I am able to become different things with all the with this Venn diagram, with all these identity markers I carry inside of me. I'm able to represent a part of myself depending on where I find myself. Yeah. So when I was in Iowa in 2016, a woman, a white, well-meaning woman, said, "Oh, I like your accent." Wow. I said, my reply was, "I don't have an accent, you have an accent," you know. And then, but she was insistent that she doesn't have an accent, that I am the one with an international accent. So I now realized I have to start explaining who I am, which is very tedious to do. But then I want to become not just one thing in wherever space I find myself. I carry all of this. So if I have a conversation with you and you are not Nigerian, I would have to let you know that I'm not just a black woman. I'm not just, I can't just be reduced to a single thing. I carry so many things inside of me, you know. And then in Nigeria, for example, I grew up in Kano State. We are originally from Anambra State, but then we grew up in Kano State. And then in Kano State, I am called Igbo woman because I am from southeastern Nigeria, and I absolutely love that, you know. But then I got outside of Nigeria and realized that I'm not just an Igbo woman. I am no longer an Igbo woman. I'm now a black woman. So I have to start explaining all of that. That's why I have to take my Venn diagram wherever I go with me. And you ask me, so where do you belong to? Then I'll begin to list everything I am. I'm not just a single thing. Yeah. Thank you.
That's very interesting. So it sounds like there is a journey that we all go through in being able to answer that question. And for some, it might be the markers that you guys all refer to. And for others, it's a much deeper question as to how do they define all of the things that make them who they are, be it their background or where they live. So that's interesting, right? You all kind of touched on language just a little bit. And, you know, one of the questions that really bugs me is, you know, we live in a world now that's becoming more global. You know, there's a tendency towards a set of languages, English being one of the most favored languages. And I guess Zuhua, as someone who has researched multicultural interactions, you know, across both African and non-African communities, you know, my provocation is, you know, why do we need so many languages and cultures? Why do we have to bother preserving anything? Why don't we just converge to one language and just be done with it?
Well, it is true that with globalization, cultures are getting bigger. We actually know each other's culture more and more. And some languages have become a language lingua franca, language of communication, and spoken by many, many people around the world. However, for me, language and culture are our heritage. They connect with our roots. And that's the name of your organization, which I love very much. And they make who we are. We talk about languages and culture. They are actually sometimes used as markers of identity earlier. But apart from that, they also shape the way we interact with each other and the way we see the world. And I remember many years ago when I arrived in UK, apart from my small but fully packed suitcase, I didn't have anything apart from my language and culture. That was 20 years ago. So after many years of living in UK, I was told by my friend, you have become westernized. I mean, this sometimes you depending how you see it, it could be compliment or could be something
criticism.
Good. Yes, but there are some Chinese cultural things I still hold on dearly after so many years. And one example, as a linguist, I have spent my spare time very often sort of thinking about language practice. So one example, looking at these sort of cultural things I have hold on dearly, is the address term. I mean, how do you address your neighbors, for example, and how do you tell your kids to talk to your neighbor who might be elderly lady or a grandpa? And I remember on one of those trips back to China with my kids, who were little then, the kids asked me why we have so many uncles, aunties in China, and why the big bloke in the barber shop kept calling him little brother. And this is because in China, I hope I not overgeneralize on this. Well, in China, you expect to use kinship term. The kinship term is when we actually use at home, auntie, uncles, these things. outside family. And it shows that Chinese cultural value of sorting out relationship first. So show respect to elderly people and also knowing your place in the society. If you are younger, you actually need to listen, look up and listen and follow the elderly. It doesn't happen all the time these days, but that's exactly one of the cultural value I think I found very difficult to sort of cross, even though I have lived in the West for so many years.
That's very interesting. It's also interesting how some certain characteristics cut across cultures. So I'm Yoruba, and as Tike will attest to, and both Bemi, Yoruba is very big on culture. So you will on respect, apologies. So, every older man or woman, depending on their age, you call mommy or daddy. You'd never call them anything else. You wouldn't even call them Mr. this or Mr. that. And then you have loads of aunties and uncles that are not related to you by blood or even by marriage. So it's interesting that you have something similar in China. But what you said there, it's what we take with us, but also it's how we set expectations for future generations. I hear that, but you can still do that even if we convert to a language, because respect is universal, surely.
So this is a follow-up question. Yes. I mean, I think it's different. The way we actually show respect is differently marked by different languages. And here, I think you're talking about the British English, not talking about American English, Australian English, New Zealand English. In the British English, it's actually depending on the context. We call it register. Register is the name of the sort of linguistic term for the context in which these languages are used. Depending on the register, how formal situation is. When we call each other, address each other on first name basis on the street, but in a very, very formal, you see these, for example, in the debate, in the parliament debate, people address each other with there are certain rules, how you address each other. So what this shows is actually, although the respect is marked very differently, when you are new to a culture, people actually have to figure out these systems, these rules, and these rules are not written. And you have to figure out by lived experience, by mistake, by trying, and actually learning your own culture also help you to understand things actually same thing can be practiced differently, and that helps you to actually open up and then be more tolerant towards differences. And I think that's really important in nowadays society.
Okay, no, that's really great. Thank you. So I guess moving on to Tunde, a question for you then. So you see yourself as an advocate of indigenous language expressions, and you are a big advocate of the Yoruba language specifically. What are your thoughts? What do you see as the rationale for really preserving the Yoruba language?
Well, I think this is language and culture. You can look at it as soft diplomacy. In the case of Yoruba, Yoruba at homeland spoken by a population of about 40 million people, and then they cross beyond Yoruba land into West Africa, and then by extension into the diaspora. Therefore, what it means is that anytime I go out as a Yoruba person, I am a representative of 3,000 or more years of language and culture, of more, maybe 80 million people. So sometimes I explain this. If I'm in a film festival and I say that I am just a representative of the people who sent me, so invariably, there's a dialogue that's been established in my work as a filmmaker and the audience. And that dialogue, I can tell you, is alive today, anywhere I go. So what it means is that I have the responsibility of being an ambassador of this Yoruba language and culture anywhere I go in the world. It's just not, and to go slightly back to the previous discussion about what I found strange these days, because English language, gradually everybody, even villages, children are beginning to speak English, and they're beginning to abandon the Yoruba language. I explained When I go to the bank, anywhere I go, and people address me as daddy or grandpa, and I have to explain to them, no, please, it is, call me Baba, or call me Baba Agba, because the language, daddy, the people who speak the English, who speak that, there's only one biological person that can be called daddy. It cannot be applied to anyone else. So it doesn't really describe the environment. So these are contradictions. As to it's important as we go about find out that I came to the conclusion that if Yoruba language should be abandoned and it goes into extinction in the homeland, in Nigeria, in West Africa, it will not go extinction outside of Yoruba land itself. That is, we will still find Yoruba language and culture, spirituality practiced, perhaps in South America, in Cuba, and other places. So it goes beyond just language. Yeah. It's a responsibility.
Let's say, sure. So I guess you touched on something there around language erosion, and I just want to kind of maybe direct this question at Uka. So we've heard language erosion. TK just mentioned that in some of the villages you go there and they're beginning to lose knowledge of the language that's being spoken in that village. But most people, when you talk to them, would say actually it's a city thing. It only happens in Lagos. What are your thoughts? I mean, as someone who's lived both in Kano and in Abia State, what are your thoughts? Is it a city problem?
I don't think it's a city problem. I think it's a political problem, and it's also a very religious problem, because before the missionaries came, the Igbo embraced this principle of dualism, this principle of plurality, the principle of ideas that a thing can stand and something else can stand beside it. Like in Igbo, we would say "Ife kolo, ife akudebea." So we're very accepting. Yeah, we are very accepting of other forms of other ways of being, other languages, other cultures, other ideas. But the thing that happened with Christianity and also the politicization of Christianity is that it swallowed that idea and eroded our old ways of being, and now made the British Christian idea that they brought to us, now made that supreme, and then now made that something we all should aspire to. And what that led to the erosion of culture, led to the erosion of tradition. For example, I gave birth to my first child in 2002. When we went to baptize her, so I was born Catholic. No, I was born Anglican, and then I married a Catholic. Before my marriage, they had to re-baptize me in the Catholic Church, even though I had been confirmed in Anglican Church. They had to re-baptize me and give me a new English name that would be in accordance with that Catholicization in Nigeria. And then that is not all. When I gave birth to my first child, Chidimma, what now happened was the priest insisted that I'm going to give my child a Western sounding name before she would be baptized in Catholic Church. So we now gave her Cynthia. For my second child, we gave her Stephanie. My last baby, we gave him Elvis, even though they're not Christian biblical names, But because of that idea that we have to aspire to Westernization, we have to aspire to English. So what happened? We now created a hierarchy of cultures with the Westernization sitting at the top and every other thing at the bottom. So you notice a case where Nigerians now aspire to become sophisticate in the sense that they give their children Western sounding name more. You would even have them anglicizing their children's native name. So a child whose name is natively would call Chigozirim, they would call that child I'm blessed. A child whose name is Ekene Delichuku, they would call that child thank God, because they want it to sound very English, very supreme, because we have so eroded our culture and way of being that we now have to aspire. And then this also trickles down to fashion, down to clothing, down to what we eat, even the way we write about what we eat.
Hair.
Yeah, down to hair. It trickles down. So we look at it as a very simple thing. Yes, I am all for having ease of communication all over the world, but also what happens is that when we aspire to that ease, what happens is that we have to choose what should be at the top and what should be at the bottom. So why can't we carry all of them at the top? Which is why whenever I'm writing, I have to include, even though I fight with my editors all the time about this, I have to include lots of Igbo, because what I am trying to do is that to uplift my primary language in my literatures. Just like when you read Juno Diaz, for example, he uses a lot of Spanglish and Spanish words. He's Dominican, you know, so he uses a lot of that. And when you're reading him, he had to insist on that. You begin to fall in love with Spanish. You begin to fall in love with the culture. You begin to fall in love with the food. Just like when you're reading a work or a novel with lots of Russian-sounding names and food, or even German or even French. Nobody translates that for you. You have to go and research to understand what you are reading. But when you write something in any Nigerian language, they expect you to even translate what beans porridge, what beans is in English. You have to call it black-eyed peas, whatever, whatever, you know, to sound very Western, and translating your food, your culture, even your language to that's uplifting, not uplifting, even so that you can buy a ticket, buy a seat at the table. You have to aspire to that Westernization, which is why one of my favorite novelists, even though I don't talk about this as much as I should, is Lola Shoneyin, for example. When you read The Secret Lives of Baba Shegi's Wife, she did something very profound with that. You are reading in English, but you just know you are a Nigerian, that you are not reading English, you are reading Yoruba. Because she wrote Yoruba in English, just like when you're reading Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart. You notice the rhythm, the cadence, the modulation of the voices, even the way the characters in the book carry themselves. You know you're reading something foreign, and it's so beautifully presented on the page that you now want to learn Yoruba. You now want to learn this culture, because they've made it so beautiful by uplifting it on the page. So that is why I am very, very bothered when I hear talks like, why don't we aspire to just one language? No, because what it does is that it erodes every other thing. And also, before I end my talk, something that happens in my husband's hometown, because of the Catholicization of his hometown, you notice that when you travel home for Christmas, the priest will tell you, oh, don't attend the cultural festival, it is hidden. Don't attend the masquerade festival, it is hidden. They even down to ostracizing members from attending all these cultural events, because the only thing you are expected to do is to attend the church events, the very Christian events. They have to now make it so Christian, like the New Yam Festival, for example, or the First Fruits Festival. You bring it to the church to be blessed. You no longer perform it the way you're supposed to perform, the way your father's fathers and your mother's mothers did that, because that has been antagonized and demonized and shaded as something evil that you should erase from your way of being and now become as Western or as sophisticated as possible. I am very bothered by that.
Yeah, I wish if we had the whole evening, we could have another webinar actually about culture and Christianity and how you reconcile the two. Because I think I understand your perspective, but I guess as a Christian, I can also see where the tension lies as well. So a few things you said there that really struck me. One is about balance. You said, why can't we just carry them all? And I know as someone who's had to go through a process myself, it's, realizing that I'm not one person, but sometimes you feel like you need to choose. And one of the questions we'll come to later on is how do we help children? What are the tips and tricks around how we help children navigate this? But let's maybe begin to think about, whose responsibility is this?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So I'm going to try to delve into whose responsibility is it. So, Uka, thank you for all what you've said. And for me, living in the UK here in London, what I've observed is that there is this blame game. We have the children blaming the parents, saying, you didn't teach me. Why didn't you teach me, mom, dad? And then we have the parents saying, you weren't interested. I tried to teach you, but you weren't interested. Who should we say is responsible for ensuring that our culture, our language are preserved and passed on? Uka?
Yeah, I think it's all of our responsibility. But I don't want to play the blame game, but it is necessary to point out where that rot started. Like I'm going to be 38 years old. I finished secondary school in 2000. Back in 2000, we're not allowed to speak our languages in the classroom. And this still happens today. So you have children who spend 80% of their time in the classrooms. So when they come home, what they do is to do a little chores with you and then to sleep and eat and play, wake up and return to school. So they go to school by, like my children, their curriculum is so tedious. They would go to school by 7 o'clock in the morning, and they are back by 5:30 or sometimes even 6 o'clock in the evening, and they are exhausted at the end of the day. So what they do is they shower, they eat. That's even if my son wants to eat, and then he goes straight to sleep. This happens. So we have this circle going on from Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then some Saturdays they're expected to come to the school. So what happens is that they spend the entire childhood, entire teenage years in the classroom speaking English because they're not allowed to speak their native language. So the little I could speak when they come home is I would be like, Chidimma, go and take a bath. No, and then also being a writer doesn't help because I am Igbo and I think in Igbo. And before I write, I have to translate my thoughts from Igbo to English language. So I go through this process of translation. And what happens is that I find myself often speaking English to my children. And I don't do that voluntarily, or I don't even know when I do it. So I noticed that I speak a mix of Igbo and English to them at home. That was before I left. And then they go to school, they speak entirely in English, except once a week on Thursday, when my daughters, the ones in senior secondary school, my first already graduated, when they speak Igbo for 1 hour in the classroom, when they learn Igbo language. And that is it. So I think that it's necessary to note where all this problem is coming from. So if we're encouraged to, the children are encouraged to speak their mother tongue in the classroom, even within the school premises, it would help. It would help. And then back at home, what are parents doing? For my husband, I'm going to get that into details about that. He had to enforce speaking Igbo language at home. Like he made it. At the point, it was very harsh. But then you had to put a kind of a reward system for them. So you speak only Igbo at home, and then you get a reward for it.
We'll come to that in a minute. Yeah. In a minute. So from your perspective, you think that the responsibility lies with the schools and with the parents?
And with the parents, yeah.
What about, that's in Nigeria. What about here in the UK, or even in America or in diaspora, where you don't speak your mother tongue in school? Shouldn't that be with the parents then?
Yeah, that would also be with the parents because you don't speak well. I haven't met any Nigerian family here. I don't know how they live, so I have to speak honestly about that. I live alone. I live in a dorm, so I wouldn't speak honestly about that. But I think when it comes to you are living in the West, the onus now lies on the parents. And I know there are many ways, and also many Nigerian families who I interact with online, what they are doing to help navigate all of that. Some of them even introduce their children to music by my favorite Nigerian rappers and singers like Fino, Flavor, Chidimma, Zoro, Umoblibo, all of those people, you know, and they made music so fun. You know, like my daughter Chidimma, before I introduced her to all of, she's going to be 18 by September anyway. Before now, she's a huge fan of Nicki Minaj, Ariana Grande, Selena Gomez, and all of that. Until I introduced her to Flavor, to Fino, even though Fino sings a lot of adult content, you know, and then Chidimma, all of those people, you know, and then you notice when I go home, I even know she's a mighty, amazing dancer. She dances so well, the Igbo way of dancing. She dances so well because it came from watching all those YouTube videos. It came from speaking them, and also I introduced her to some of the YouTube people, YouTube channels where they teach children to speak Igbo. You know, they are very, very simple way, but then you realize that children, they keep practicing that at home. So I would call my son, and the first thing he would say is, "Mommy, kedu, inokwa." That's it. Rather than saying, "How are you?" You know, he would he's made it a routine. Inokwa, he repeats it over and over, and it becomes like music. Even when I call him in the middle of the night, inokwa, of course, I'm on the Mofuma. I just spoke with you like 45 minutes ago. I'm calling you again, but he repeats it. So it becomes a sort of routine, you know. So I feel that's what a parent who lives far away from home, away from Nigeria, that's what you can do by introducing them to all those literatures or music or other forms of way they can learn their native language.
Fantastic. TK, what do you think? Do you think, to what extent do you agree with Uka? Do you think it's responsibility of the parents, the school, the government, or who should where does the blame lie? What are your thoughts?
There has to be a reason why they emphasize mother tongue. Mother tongue. It wasn't called the father tongue or uncle tongue. It is mother tongue. You know. So, but in the case where the mother wants to abdicate that responsibility, the father can take charge. In my own case, I think I was a bit authoritarian because I called my wife and said, look, I'm going to give you a condition and it is non-negotiable. In this home, Yoruba will be the language of the home. Well, I understand if people have spouses from other places, then it can be negotiated. But in this case, we are Yoruba and Yoruba. So there is no contradiction about what the language in this home must be. But if you cannot abide by that rule, you can go and marry someone else. You know, I could explain to your mother, I could explain to your mom and say, look, it's not we're not quarreling, we're just disagreeing on principle. This is what I introduced in the home. And if she cannot, I can respect her feelings. If she doesn't feel like that, then she can go and marry someone else and leave the children behind. You know, so basically, I think it's responsibility. It's tough because when the children came around Oshodi area in Lagos, every home spoke, their children spoke English. You know, they changed the mother tongue to English. Only my children spoke Yoruba at all because they can do what they like. That's why we pay. In fact, I took them off a private school. We were paying a lot of money and I saw the way they were going. So I took them and put them in a public school. You know, so that is how, you see, after about 8 years, the harm is done. There can't be the process of identity crisis already started, and it's very difficult to reverse. You know, so it depends again, but I think primarily it is the duty of the parents. You know, because now I'm sure my children are they are happy by that my decision, because my daughter especially, she knows all the Diofagua work, the 5 works she read in Yoruba language, and now she's a graduate of international law and diplomacy, and therefore she's went back into Diofagua to index all the characters setting in those books, so that if we are ever going to build some kind of park, amusement park or something, she already identified the characters and the settings in them. So I believe this is an important process for people who think it's too late. Then they started this Yoruba school in University of Ibadan, where even Americans do come and do it. I'm amazed, in a month or so, the Yoruba they write and speak is unbelievable. And you know that writers, like Oka said, you cannot translate into any language if you lose your primary language. And that is what happened to our first generation of writers, Chebe, Olisakwe, Sikranukin, all of them, because they mastered their mother tongue before they started to work in another language. So you work in so many ways. The benefits are, in fact, the benefits cannot be quantified.
Yeah, thank you for that. Zu, as an academic, I want you to come up this with some sort of academic background, because we have a lot of parents who, as TK mentioned, who are, you know, married into maybe, let's say, for example, another culture, and they don't speak that language. What does the research suggest? What does in terms of responsibility, just in terms of learning the language and passing it on to your children?
And I really, it's really interesting to hear Wuka and TK talk about their experience. And I can sympathize with both what you said, actually, because when the kids were young, a little, we actually, as parents, we actually need to expose them to the language as early as possible. It's actually really easy if you actually start setting that habit, you know, like house rule. If everybody speak the languages, and then the kids will actually pick the language really like a sponge to the water, water to sponge. So that's actually, you know, at early stage, I think if parents can actually start bringing the language back home, talk language at home and expose them, that will be actually solve all the problem. However, what I have observed is actually when the kids actually, even when they actually speak the home languages, there is a shift, and there's a very significant shift to the dominant language when they start school. There are actually 2 critical periods. One is actually when the kids starting school, And the second is actually when the older sibling go to the school. So you don't have to go to school yourself. If you have older sibling, they start school. And when they come home, they start English. And you see the shift to dominant language here in UK is English. So what happens when these things happen? What do you do? And I think this is actually really important to see that wider support for these language learning and maintenance. It's not really just about speaking, using it. It's really about, I see, really important to have this very relaxed and encouraging approach to multilingualism. And I think that's really huge gap in the UK. That's why I actually really see important to actually work with government and then with the school to actually encourage, to actually make these kids feel it's normal, nothing to be embarrassed about if you speak another language. In fact, this is something actually we need to celebrate. So let the kids use the language in the school, let the kids to speak language in the public without feeling this is something odd, this is something embarrassing. And that's what I think, for these, we can talk about these approaches as bottom-up approach or top-down. Bottom-up meaning starting from early, starting from family, starting from home. Top-down, we do also need top-down approach, that support from the government, support from the school. And the community effort is also equally important. I mean, organizations like Culture Trees, helping, bringing these parents network together, having this support group is also very important.
Thank you for that. I think for me, what comes to mind when you mentioned the top-down approach is you're obviously saying that it should start with the government and then into the homes. That probably works when you're in a country where it's actively promoting that language. But I think that most of us in this webinar, and I speak for other people as well as myself, being here in the UK and wanting to pass on my language to my children, the government in the UK are not going to actively try to promote Yoruba language, for example, because it's not their priority. In that case, I'm going to go back to the question I asked earlier. Whose responsibility is it? And that's open to everybody. That's open to the panel. What do you think?
Well, sometimes when I visit England, when I come to London, I visit some homes and I see how some parents have, handled this. And I know that I'm always impressed when I see homes where the children speak Yoruba very well. In fact, they do well at school. If they have a social event and they ask them to come out and, dance or sing, sometimes they just burst into a Yoruba song and the school is interested. Oh, wow. We can't understand a word of what you are saying, but this is beautiful. And then they pass, they call the parents and say, look, your child is wonderful. She sang a song. See, the thing is, again, it depends, but some parents think, well, it's good riddance because they're never going to need the language anyway. So why divide that? But language itself is knowledge. Language itself is, it helps a lot academically. That's what I think. So sometimes it's half and half. In some homes, they talk about the Yoruba land as if it's somewhere in Africa. Oh, your uncle from Africa is here, But then in some homes, you realize that they've managed. I recorded a 14-year-old girl who says, I have never been to Nigeria, but all this I recorded in Yoruba, and she gave me a reason why it's important for everybody to retain their original language.
I'm just reading through some of the comments now, and some people have agreed with you, and some people have said it's the parents' responsibility, some said it's the culture itself, and some people have said it's the extended family. So we have grandparents, we have a lot of people in the society that does that can help with that. And I think what you just said, Natika, brings me nicely to my next question, and that's about barriers to making a change and the risk to doing nothing. So you make a compelling case for the need to embrace our culture. But many people would say, what is the point? I don't need the language, I don't speak it, it has no economic value. It's old-fashioned. Where you live in the Yoruba community, what do you think stops people from doing anything about it? TK?
I think the education, the educational policy, because even the private schools have made it a point of duty to forget about the language and just go straight into English. And sometimes it's embarrassing because now that the children are off school because of COVID-19, the kind of messages they send for children to play at home, I'm embarrassed by the kind of English they are loading nursery school, nursery class. The English they are sending to them for homework, it's as if they're in secondary school already, so they're going to lose both ways. The English is going to be used there at the end of the day, and they've already lost the Yoruba language. So I think there has to be some kind of review of the educational, the policy, to take our indigenous languages seriously. Because let me just explain to you that the Yoruba of the 21st century, we have to prepare the children. Of course, the Yoruba is given, but the Yoruba must be prepared to learn English, add French or Portuguese if we are going to play in Africa alone. So we are looking at Yoruba children who will be multilingual.
And Uka, what is your perspective from an Igbo point of view?
So in 2017, I was selected as one of the writers who attended the seminar hosted by the American legation in Morocco, in Tangier, Morocco. And when I got there, I noticed something very, very disturbing. So in present-day Morocco, you would find young people, and when I mean young people, people in their 20s, 30s, who don't speak their mother tongue, who don't speak their native language, So the native language there is Amazigh, but they don't speak it. And when you ask a typical Moroccan, he would tell you that the language is now being spoken by their granduncles or grandparents or the older generation. So what do the young Moroccans mostly speak? They speak, some of them speak a little bit of English, thanks to the American legation in Morocco, who are encouraging them to write and speak English and translate into English language from Arabic to English. They speak standard Arabic in the classrooms because, of course, the colonization. And then religion. They also speak a bit of Spanish. They also speak French. So you have all of these foreign languages struggling for power within Morocco. And then on the streets, they speak Derija. Derija is like where we speak Pidgin English in Nigeria. It's a broken form of language that was birthed from the violence of other colonizers' languages. So it has a bit of Arabic, has a bit of Derija, and French has a bit of so many languages gathered from all of the languages in Morocco. So they speak that on the street, just like we have our Nigerian Pidgin. But they're not allowed to speak Derija in the classroom, But then when you ask them, and when I got there, I thought Derija was actually the mother tongue. But then my friend there, who I met there, told me, no, that's the broken version of the language I'm speaking on the street. So do you speak your mother tongue, or would I call it native language? He doesn't. He told me that many of his friends, they don't anymore. And then I didn't understand how we are transitioning into that phase until I got back home. So, and then when I got back in 2017, around June 2017, I realized that my children are doing the same thing. They are speaking English at home. They do a bit of Igbo, then they speak Nigerian Pidgin, then they speak every other thing, as they told them in the classroom. But do they speak Igbo fluently? They don't. Okay, and that's not all. We traveled home for that Christmas and realized that my cousins who live in the village in Nigeria don't speak Igbo in the village, which is so unusual. So I spoke with one of my grandnieces, and the mother said, oh, she doesn't speak Igbo anymore. She speaks only English. Mm-hmm. And I was shocked. I'm like, this is the seat of the mother tongue. This is the seat of the culture. And if we have young children at home, in our hometowns, who don't even speak Igbo, who are now being called the anglicized versions of their name, I see southeastern Nigeria transitioning to what Morocco is today. And I am not dissing Morocco here. I am very sympathetic of what's happening there. And then there are really amazing activists who are fighting to bring back sort of a revival of the native language in Morocco today. So that's what I am hoping for. So the risk for me, the risk here is I see that erosion coming. I see that happening in the next 10 years. I see that, like, you have young people who don't even speak it. And I'm not talking about young people who live abroad, who live in Nigeria, in southeastern Nigeria, who don't even speak it anymore. But they understand it, but they don't speak back. So when you talk to them in Igbo, they respond in English. When you force them to respond in Igbo, they just chip in a little bit of Igbo and then couple everything together. So I see all of that. And then the grand effect is that we are also forgetting our history. We are forgetting so many things. For example, my children didn't even know that our relative, these are my great-grand-cousins, that they still bear their great-grandmother's name. You know, so they are very, very resistant of Westernization. You know, before the missionaries came, where I come from, children are identified by their mother's name, not their father's. You know, so you would find them, they'll be like, oh, these are Umo Ukamaka. If it was in Old Igbo, my children will be identified by my name, not by my husband's. But when the British came, what they did was, so what is your name? My name is Ukamaka. So what's your father's name? No, what is your surname? I don't have a surname. What is your father? But sorry, let me rephrase. What is your name? I am Ukamaka, the daughter of, my mother's name is Nkiru, daughter of Nkiru. They will say, no, you are Ukamaka, the daughter of your father. So they will ask you for your father's name and they will cobble up a name for you. So Ukamaka Okoye, which is my father's name, rather than Ukamaka Nkiru, you know. So that was what happened. And many of us embrace that. Today, many Igbo even think that having your name and your father's name is Igbo culture. It is not. It's imported. And they don't know that. And why we don't even have that conversation anymore is that what's the point for many of them at home when they don't even speak the language, when everything is taught in English, even down to the church, you know, they don't do that anymore. So that's the risk for me. I see that massive erosion, but I'm hoping for a revival.
I think what I'm hearing from you, Ukamaka, is that it's actually a mindset thing. The barriers are actually in our own minds, and we are putting the barriers on ourselves. I don't think anybody, the West have come, can say, oh, this happened because of colonization, this is what they did. But that was a long time ago. Now it's a mindset thing. Our minds are the ones that have now been affected by what's happened. Yeah. And I want to hear from you, Professor Zuhau. What do you see are the longer term impacts from the communities you've observed? I know you've worked with a lot of communities like Somali, Polish, here in the UK. What are the long-term impacts within that society that you've worked with?
I think what I have observed, I have been working mainly from migrant communities. So these are actually people who settled, moved across the different borders. And I have seen a shift very much similar to what Uka described, is actually language shift. So in the language capacity ways within families. So you see these typical example is grandparents speaking heritage language, and parent generation speak a bit of both, and younger generation, our children actually speaking English primarily. So sadly, when it comes to the third generation of migrant family, and there isn't a shared language communication. And that's very hard because you don't really have this language bonding anymore, because our language is very different. The way we actually express love, emotions are very different across different languages. And it's very hard not to have the language bonding. And so in talking to many participants in my family language project, some of them actually said they're very sorry and regretful not being able to share their stories and experience and particular emotions with their children. And also they felt sorry their children not be able to share the similar experience with grandparents.
That's very interesting. I think from what I've come across in my personal experiences, there is that element of regret. A lot of parents do feel like kind of regret in terms of, you know, being able to migrate to another country, and they wanted to assimilate to that society. So they kind of left. And they were advised actually not to, you know, interfere with the child's learning, or their, you know, your child might speak later if you mix the two languages. So a lot of people do feel that regret, and that's what they see as the barriers and what's caused them to stop. So just to summarize, I think I like what TK said about being multilingual, and I think that's the way forward for us, is about multilingualism and being able to like speak more than being bilingual, seeing the world as your oyster and being open to different languages. So yeah, I think it's really encouraging to hear that. And I'm just going to pass on now to Buki.
Yeah.
Give us the nitty-gritty, right?
Well, so just listening to you, I think Tike and Ukamaka, it's clear that you are practicing what you preach. So quite struck by Tike, your example of the marriage contract with your wife around speaking Yoruba language or she's out the door. Interesting, maybe a risky proposition in this day and age, but it worked for you. And I guess, Uka, you mentioned that your husband, has mandated that at home. But I guess for some parents, right, they won't find it easy. They might not have the capacity, they may not have the capability. Some of them, especially parents who are both from different backgrounds, they may not have they may not be able to speak the language themselves, right? So, how do parents address this challenge? How do they make their kids ambassadors of a language and a culture that they themselves perhaps aren't aware, don't know well enough to pass on? What do they do in that situation? And I'll probably start with TK.
Well, beyond the language and the way we are going, we are already in a cultural vacuum. If we are in a cultural vacuum, then moral decay will follow. So some of the things that are happening in the society today, why are we surprised? Because obviously, the 8 years of a child, most of those moral codes are supposed to have been passed on to the children. So there's no doubt about it that once we miss that point, then the process of rehabilitation is going to be very, very difficult. And we haven't even found, we are discovering the usefulness and the importance of our language every day. Look at in Yoruba land, for instance. We have not talked about drum surrogacy because the language we speak is different. The drum, because they can reproduce the 3 tones, the line of drummers have a drum vocabulary of more than of poetry, of proverbs and things in their head when they drum. And then we are beginning to lose all of that, And
but I guess, so Tike, let me just interrupt you for a second though. Yeah. But for those parents, right, who don't have the ability to, or the context, the language, don't know the language or the culture, what steps can they take to help their children?
Yes, the harm in this is that we are beginning to have half and half parents. Mm-hmm. Because there was a lady I was going to marry, and then we met, and how are you? How is the family? Oh, I have 3 boys. Oh, I hope they speak Yoruba. And you say, how do they speak Yoruba? How much Yoruba do I know? Even me, the mother, how much Yoruba do I know? So we are beginning to pass to that, half and half parents. The way we are going to parents who are completely, they've forgotten the language entirely. So I think the solution lies in both government and, and we have to do something about this. Otherwise, the consequence is going to be disastrous. God forbid that Yoruba should go into extinction, but any language that is not spoken will be quickly forgotten. Like any book that's not published, it goes into extinction. And I don't think Yoruba will go into extinction, but it just show you the harm that will be done will be irreparable.
Okay, thank you. And okay, what do you think? What's the solution? How do we help parents who don't have the capacity or the capability to pass on language and culture to their children?
I think you're already doing the work. I think Culture Tree is already doing the work. This amazing platform you've created, this webinar, you're going to have it uploaded online, and parents we're going to share it on social media, encourage people to download it so that those who don't even live at home will have access to all the materials and resources you share on your website. And I'm also looking forward to you also translating works and even short stories and even have it orally read and uploaded on your website so that parents who don't speak their native language anymore, who don't have the time to do all that work, can introduce their children to all your research. The other day, John Boyega wrote a very funny letter, thanks to the COVID-19 pandemic, to the barbers all over the world. And he asked for Yoruba translators. And you should see the competition for that. At the end of the day, even the young man I got introduced to, called Abba, introduced it. And then somebody else did an amazing job. Before they both did it, I was so jealous. I mean, I was hoping for an Igbo actor or somebody do something or call for such competition. I became so jealous. You should see the vibrancy, even in the way they translate, the way they read, with the music and even the talking drums in the background. That was amazing. So that's the work we are doing. That's going to help parents who don't have access to resources to introduce their children to, and then at home, what I did for as much I can do is, since I don't have much Igbo literature to introduce my children, I give them the Igbo Bible. They are Christian. We are Christians, so they read. When I was a child, they used to give us real words in the church. They would ask. I actually did recite John chapter 1, the entire John chapter 1 in Igbo language when I was a child, and I read it in the church, and my father was so proud of me. They gave me gifts, so that did help. I did a lot of work learning how to read Igbo, the alphabet, how to pronounce the words, the diacritics and all of that. But we don't have that much anymore. We don't have that in our churches presently today. But what we have now are people who are using social media to spread the gospel of the native language. Like John Boyega, who is my favorite person in the world at the moment now, If we have more of those research, like I'm very, very envious of what the Yoruba people are doing with languages, So and also I have my friend Kola Tubosun. Oh my God, I'm so jealous of whatever he posts on Twitter. So
he's on the webinar, by the way. So he's listening to you.
So when we have all this revival going on social media, our parents will have access to so many resources to introduce their children to, and also even music. We have we have Olamide, we have Reminisce, we have Nice, we have all those people, and they sing, they use music as a tool to spread their stories, and we have to listen to them and they learn from it. So I think we are doing the work. I just want us to give it more attention.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thanks for that. I think, and that is our vision, right? That we do it not just for Yoruba language, but for all Nigerian languages and all African languages, which is a big task. But yes, the more we can do, the better. And I guess final question then for Zuhua. So I guess how, from your experience of working with Somali communities and other European communities, what do you think would help parents, in addition clearly to what we're doing at Culture Tree?
I actually think I second what we have just talked about. Be creative, making use of all the opportunities you can think of. One thing I have found worked really well is actually learning together. So this learning together is about creating opportunities for your children learn perhaps with their peers. Sometimes if you have the opportunity to set up complementary school, go ahead, because they are wonderful way of helping the kids to actually get to know other kids and also socializing with other kids. And it doesn't have to be formal school. It could be just actually loose network. Parents, several families meet regularly together, having parents taking turns to actually to teach, making fun, and use all these space, really creating space to actually making children to learn from each other. And I think that there are also questions coming on the screen talking about intercultural couples, and that is actually maybe this opportunity for parents to learn together with the kids. And I have seen quite a few intercultural couples actually learning, making fun, and play with languages, and that's all part of the fun of learning a new language.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point you raise. So we run 2 classes every week for 4 to 6 and 7 pluses. These are live classes with a teacher, and we encourage the parents to join the kids. And one of our parents was saying that she learns quite a lot through those lessons, because she's and also I think it has such a huge impact on the child, because the child realizes that actually, mommy's taking this seriously because they're with me, watching me learn this language. And they also have a chance to practice conversations with other kids as well. So absolutely, I think I agree with you in terms of, tries to kind of make it a much more of a lived experience and shared with other children. So, and I think, that frustration in terms of how we do it is what led, Gbemi Sola to set up Culture Tree. I guess, Gbemi, in terms of your experience? What were the challenges that you saw that's kind of brought us to where we are today?
Okay. I mean, it's part of the conversation about making it fun for children. And I've always kind of sought ways to make learning fun. Because even from a young age, I know that kids don't like to be shouted at or sit down there, we're going to learn Yoruba today. So for me, it was about finding ways in which to make learning fun for children. And started with my children, teaching them nursery rhymes. And I noticed that from nursery rhymes, because music is actually a fantastic way of learning a language. If you think about learning ABC, we learned A, B, C, D, E, F, G, 1, 2, 3, the same thing. So for me, it was about finding resources to make children learn in a fun and exciting way. And we started very small. Even now, it's a journey for us. So every day we're learning new words. It's not a case of, trying to accumulate many years of learning into one. I'm teaching them along the way as I'm teaching other children. And the good thing about it is that they find it quite fun, because obviously we're teaching other kids, they're also seeing that mommy is interested, everybody's interested, people actually enjoy what they're doing. So it encourages them as well to keep on learning. So for me, the challenges are many in terms of not having the environment where you can actually, immerse them in the culture and the language. Because aside from, my immediate community, if they lived in Nigeria, for example, they'll be surrounded by the language. Although I hear, Aduka has said, that doesn't happen in Nigeria anymore. We have people who don't even speak their language in Nigeria. So I feel like, in a way, living abroad and in a diaspora makes it hard. But as a community, if we come together as a society and a community, we can make it happen. And that's what we're trying to do at Culture Tree.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I can see some of the questions that are coming up there as well, right? So, second generation parents get access to resources online. There are loads of videos that you can use as starters. What we found, though, that you do need some structured learning, because the children need to understand not just to learn the words, but they also need to understand how the sentences are formed and why things are constructed the way they do. So you can't get around some sort of structured lesson like you would in a French or a Spanish class. So yeah, music does definitely help with children. Conscious of time, we said we'd give you enough time for questions. We've tried to pick up some of the questions as we've gone along. Just want to say quick thanks to all our panelists for their contribution so far. We're going to open the floor to questions now. Amelia, I'm just going to put you on to talk now, so who do we have our first question from? Okay. I guess in terms of questions, we'll unmute you to ask to ask your question. When you do, state your name,
your hand up if you're
where you're calling from, and your question. I think Amelia is going to start selecting from those on the chat. If you have another question, you can either send her a message or raise your hand up as I can't see your full name, has just done. So Amelia, over to you. Who's our first question from?
Okay, so we have the first question from Kathy. Kathy, do you want to unmute yourself?
I'm gonna unmute her. She can't.
I muted you. Okay, you are unmuted. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I had to have my daughter unmute me. Sorry.
That's all right.
I don't know how to work it. I'm not sure which question you're talking about because I asked so many through the thing. We're calling from Ohio in the United States, by the way.
Hello.
Yes. My husband and I.
Hello.
Yeah. My husband is Yoruba, but we met in Japan, and we spent 7 years in Japan. So a lot of the things that you were saying about the Asian, family structure and things like that, we get that. And yeah, when are you going home? We got that a lot over there. The whole identity thing is kind of really strange because we lived in Japan for 7 years, and then we came back to the United States. And of course, like you were saying, in America, he is now Black. He is, before he's Nigerian. The identity thing is kind of weird. So then our children are having, we're trying to figure out, I'm trying to figure out what kind of identity they're going to have. Like right now they identify as brown. It's really interesting, and we're learning. So we're in 5th and 3rd grades is what they've just finished. And there's no Yoruba community here. And that's why I found you guys online. And I think the community is such an important aspect of it. I think even my husband feels lonely sometimes. We have one Yoruba friend that we visit is 5 hours away. And that's Yoruba time. But other than that, there really isn't that culture. So it's very hard to figure out how to root the kids in the fact that they're half African, and then also my kids, I think, feel they're American. Like they know they're African, but yeah, it's a really hard situation, and they don't speak any Yoruba at all.
And I did see that you commented there. I think I saw a comment from you saying your husband changes when he speaks Yoruba.
Yeah, his whole demeanor kind of changes and things. I know a little bit when I was trying to like at first learn. It was kind of before the whole internet thing. I found some books. I guess the University of Wisconsin had a Yoruba teacher, and they taught Yoruba. So I found some books and was learning like some of the basics, so I can kind of understand what's going on. But obviously I can't speak it. The tones are very hard for me and things like that. But yes, he completely changes. He's louder. He's more boisterous. You know, she was saying there are some cultural things that just don't they don't go over. When he speaks in English, his face changes. And I'm sure it's the same when we speak in Japanese. Our whole body language and everything changes as opposed to English and things. So there are things you don't get. And I want the children to be able to communicate with their grandfather in Yoruba and you know, things like that. Yeah.
So I guess your question, Kathy, is as somebody who's trying to make sure that your children understand both sides of the coin, that they appreciate the Nigerianness and they understand the language. Your thing is finding the resources and a community to help you in that journey.
Yeah, I think that's really hard, especially, you know, they want to be with other kids. Why would they learn Yoruba? It makes no sense to them. Nobody they know really speaks Yoruba except Dad and Baba, and they also speak English. And, there's no incentive for them to do it, you know, it's very hard. The only time they're immersed in is when we visit our friends and the boys all speak. And it's the boys, you know, I have girls, but it's the boys that all speak it. And yeah, so it's a different situation, I think.
Professor Zuhao, do you have any suggestions or tips for Kathy there in terms of what she can do, what they can do?
Yeah, well, that's actually really interesting to hear your story, Cassie. I think when you are talking, I think because of COVID-19, we are in this situation, in a funny kind of situation. We are socially isolating, distancing, but on the other hand, we are connecting with each other through digital means. So whether you know, with the maybe one of the legacy of this crisis is actually people feel more confident and then normal to use digital to connect with each other. I wonder whether this is actually a way for you to connect with your husband's family, extended family, who actually speak or share the same languages. And the other thing I was going to say, the language learning is very long process, lifelong. And I don't get worked up or frustrated when the children don't actually learn as fast. You know, you don't really see the result as quickly as you would like to, because they will actually, it is a slow process. But at some point, when they getting older, they will actually naturally will want to find out a bit about who they are. And the language will become one of their anchors they will turn to. And I think looking back from my own experience, it is a slow process, but we are so pleased when they were, my two boys, when they were 14, they actually started, you know, themselves asking these questions, initiating these questions. Before that, it was usually us, actually, my husband also speaks Chinese, it's us trying to prompt them to actually speak language. But at some point, when they were 14, the situation changed. So I would say keep doing it. Don't get frustrated if you haven't seen the result yet, because it will come.
Okay, I know that your children are teenagers and they learned as teenagers, right? Can you share a little bit of some of that, you know, them learning as teenagers and what you did?
Oh yeah, I have to admit that I actively didn't do anything special, because I was one of the problem I was speaking English to them, mix of English and Igbo. But the whole revival came from my husband, who insisted that at the beginning he was very harsh about it. He made it compulsory that they must have to speak Igbo in the house. Once you come back from school, you leave English at the door and you speak Igbo. If not, you don't talk. You know, so he made it was very harsh. But then I had to mediate, and so we reached kind of a middle ground. And when I left home and I moved to the United States, what he started doing was he started this reward system. You know, he would give them rewards. at the time, even like, they all have their bank accounts. He would say, okay, so if you speak Igbo for 5 minutes without including one English language, you get 2,000 naira, So it became sort of competition between the children, and whenever he does that, he transfers money into the account, they would get the credit alert, and they are all prepped up, the next day they will be competing. So they began to learn. They began to listen to music. So it was fun for them, and I really, really liked that. And some of the resources I also introduced to my children. There is this woman she lives in London. Her name is Yvonne Chioma Mbanefo, She has this language classes that she also posts on YouTube, and then also this Swiss blogger. She's called Nwan Yocha. She is a Swiss woman married to an Igbo man. So she has this step-by-step learning Igbo process that she posts on YouTube, So these are the few resources I know. But since my husband started the reward system, there has been major improvement. At the beginning, my children, they really, really hated it. But then since they knew they were getting something out of it, they became super interested. In fact, they had to even go out on their own to look up more conventional or even interesting ways to learn Igbo language. And that was super helpful.
Okay. Good. No, thanks for that. We seem to have another question from Jenny Julius Mboli. Emily, can you just unmute her?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've unmuted him.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone.
Hello.
Good evening. Hi.
Yeah. I'm from Bradford. Talking from Bradford. Nice to hear. My question is, since I've been here from the beginning, and I've been hearing about Yoruba, Igbo, and other languages, and my question is, what is the culture tree actually doing about other languages that are not, or other cultures? Like I myself, I'm a Mambila, and that Mambila is one of the native language from the north side of Nigeria. So it's like people take Nigeria actually to be Hausa, Igbo, and Yoruba. So like, I'm from the north, but I don't speak Hausa, and most of the people, sometimes they're always surprised to hear me say I don't speak Hausa and I'm from the north. So like, that our own languages are not that identified worldwide. What is the what is the culture tree doing about that? Because I'm a Mambila, and I will not be surprised if I'm the only person here and my husband. So I don't know. My question is, what is the culture tree actually doing about that?
I think it's a really good question. I think I'd probably start by saying, the first thing we're doing is just raising awareness of the fact that as parents, we have a responsibility to try and pass our language and our culture on to other children. So that's the first thing, that point around awareness. We would love to be able to teach pretty much every Nigerian and African language via our website. That's a huge ask. I think it's, we'll probably end up raising the awareness and giving other people the platform to be able to do that. What I would say to you is, let's have a conversation about your language. I have to say, I'm an ignorant Yoruba woman in that I'd never heard about Mambila until today. But then I also know that in Africa, we've got over 600 endangered languages, so languages that will become extinct if we do nothing. And I don't know if yours is one of those languages. So yes, reach out to us. Let's see what we can do to help you. If we can, we will. Let's just take it from there. The least we might be able to do is connect with people who speak the same language. You can form a community where you can then help support and develop your children. I can see Kola Tubosun raising his hand.
Let's find him.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Good. So reach out to us.
Before I go, like, how am I going to reach out to you people? Is it in the website?
So if you respond to the email that you received today, or just send an email to info@culturetree.com, I'll ask Amelia just as a backup. Can you please send Jenny an email? A private chat with our email address, please.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Hello, you're unmuted now. Go ahead, please.
Hello. Thank you, everyone, for the interesting conversation. I'm glad that this platform exists. I'm glad that people are having this conversation. A question I've always wanted to ask. This time, I mean, I don't know who has the right standing to answer, but when we talk of Nigeria, most of the problems stem from the multilingual nature of the environment. So when you put the question to policymakers as to the importance of the mother tongue, the first thing they ask you is how do we set up a policy that doesn't discriminate? Somebody talked about being Mambila, for instance. There's several languages in the country, about 500 of them. So does anyone have any idea of, I mean, should we just accept that the only way we're going to be able to solve this problem is let private institutions like Culture Tree be the place where people go and find and encourage people to do more work? But is there any way that government can make a policy that can benefit everybody at once, or we should just assume that the government is useless in this case?
I mean, from my experience, what I would say is that I think that the onus does lie on us as a society, but the government is responsible. Actually, they can do. There's so much more that they can do, and at the moment, I have reached out and I haven't heard anything. So I don't know if anybody on this call is part of the government or part of a policy maker. But I think maybe that's a question, maybe TK, because you've been at it for quite a long time in terms of your experience doing this. TK, is there anything that you've come across, or is there any government kind of interventions that you think might be helpful in this situation?
I think you have to. Okay. I think it's a question of going back to how we started education when we were young, because I'm sure in the Nigerian constitution, the educational policy states that the first 4 years or so of a child, he has to be educated in his mother tongue. And that has been thrown out of the window. I think the first few years of a child, he has to be educated in the mother tongue first before English is introduced. So what they did in our own case was Yoruba. The language was used to teach all other subjects, including English language. Then later, you continue with English. If they are continued with that policy, I'm sure every Nigerian or every tribe in Nigeria will have access to their own mother tongue and have started education in that language. So we wouldn't be in this problem today. So I think that we have to go back and check what exactly is in the policy, educational policy of Nigeria, and then perhaps restate that or bring it back. I think that is one of the things we should look at.
Yeah. I think I just saw a message. Thanks for that response, TK. I just saw a message from Kola that suggests that it's still in the policy, it's just not being implemented. So perhaps what we need to do in addition is compel them to implement it by reaching out to the right people. Probably after COVID, given that they've got a whole bunch of other priorities, but still important. We seem to have another question from Uju Uku.
I'm just going to unmute you, Uju.
Okay. Uju, can you unmute yourself so you can speak?
No, we have to unmute. Yeah, I've unmuted.
Yeah, okay.
Hi.
Hi.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I'm so excited we're having this conversation, honestly. From what Kola just said, I mean, I think it's a good point. But instead of looking at the government to do something for Nigeria, I'm thinking we should approach it along the lines of states, having something locally. Like insisting that every school in that state makes that language of the state a compulsory language for everyone. I think it will go a long way. Because for me now, I'll just touch on a few points again. I grew up in the Southeast, right? And was part of those that were asked not to speak vernacular in the classroom. But you see, it was an interesting thing because that then it was funny. People would not talk in the class till the end of the class because they didn't know what to say in English. So they would wait till after the school time to talk to you. Do you understand? So that made them a bit you know, it wasn't nice for those who couldn't say anything in English when they insisted. So I think that even affected them up to secondary school and university level. Then when we got to secondary school, found out that the children that came in, you know, to our schools from other states, not Enugu, where I grew up, could speak better English. So in trying to communicate with them, it was also a challenge for those who couldn't speak to communicate with those people. So for some parents, when you see that their children are not speaking English, for some of
I think we've lost Uju there. So we'll suggest we move on. So we'll move on. I think what Uju's saying there is that it's, you know,
trying to correct that, you know, not being a place like Nigeria, because you need to get their children to speak good English. They now stop.
Uju, can you hear us?
Okay, so I suggest we move on to Wale Hassan.
We'll come back to you, Uju.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Wale. Hi.
It's so pleasant to be part of this discussion. My name is Wale Hassan. I'm into broadcast journalism. And my little contribution first is that a lot of time we overlook the importance of name when it comes to identity.
Yeah.
If you're not so proud of your name, I'm very sure you have some challenges when it comes to your identity. Your name carries a lot with your identity. That's first. Secondly, this a piece of information regarding the policymakers. There's a point in time when the Lagos State government insisted that the Lagos State House of Assembly should communicate and go ahead with their discussions in Yoruba language. If that is still ongoing, I wouldn't know because it's been some time since I left home. But notwithstanding, I think that's a good way of encouraging people to sustain the language. Now, my question is this. Are we giving serious consideration to the fact that when Baba TK suggested that multilingualism will really help in the building of identity and helping our kids grow up to be proud of who they are we not looking at multiculturalism too? Because language itself is a carriage of the culture. That's a question and an opinion. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much for that. I'm actually going to direct that to Zuhua to start as from a multicultural and bilingual perspective. What are your thoughts on that question?
Very good question. I'm actually coming from my early research actually has been about multilingualism and also intercultural context. So I have been really thinking about, instead of looking at culture as separate entities, we're actually in a period that's actually more intercultural rather than multi. Multi, as I guess, you know, from the name, it still suggests we are actually having multiple culture in standalones. Think about this as perhaps using a metaphor. You have tomatoes, 1, 2, 3, they actually sort of in a bowl. They don't really have any contact with each other. The reason I actually like intercultural much more than multicultural is actually because it talk about how we interact into contact with each other. And then when we contact with each other, when we actually negotiate with each other, new things come out of it, new identity coming out of it. So you don't have to feel you have to choose one or the other, or you have multiple, but these different parts of identities talk to each other, intersect with each other, and that make us who we are.
Yeah, no, that's great, thanks. And I can see Uka just nodding vigorously there. What do you think?
I think I totally agree with what Zuhua said about that cross-cultural dialogue between different cultures. But then I also would like to note that the Western culture is already a presence. In Nigeria, for example, is already a dominant presence. It's already taking a supreme role in the continent, in the country itself, you know. So it's not even, because of the way we handle things at home, it's not even allowing for cross-cultural dialogue with other cultures, you know. So it's now a case of us asking that culture we've made supreme at home to allow for dialogue with our own native cultures, you know. So which is why I am straddling the fence here. I am all for multilingualism, I am also for cross-cultural dialogue. But for us to allow for room for this to grow, we have to make way for our primary cultures to sit at the table, you know, because it's being reduced as something inferior, which is why we would rather call our children by the anglicized version of their name. I'd like to note something. When I went to Iowa, the University of Iowa in 2016, I met a friend from Guyana, and his own friend said, "Oh, I went to school with a girl called Kemi." And I said, "Oh, she's Yoruba. She's from southwestern Nigeria." And the woman was super shocked. She was like, "How did you know she's Yoruba?" I said, "From her name, you can tell, you know." And she mentioned again another name from southeastern Nigeria. I said, "Oh, that person is Igbo." She thought I had done something so marvelous, something so genius, like without knowing that it's just something so simple. So I understand that, because it was then that it occurred to me that our identity markers are our languages. And then from our language, and then we also have the religion, because Nigeria is so divided around along religious lines. And also then from our names, you can tell which particular part of culture this person is coming from. But then also we already elevated English language to a certain level that even other languages don't even reach that up anymore. So for us to allow for cross-cultural dialogue, for us to allow for multilingualism, we have to make way. We have to maybe reduce the power we've ascribed to the Western language we have in Nigeria for us to have that kind of conversation. Yeah.
Sure. No, great. Thanks. And I guess TK, you know, you raised the point around French and Portuguese and Yoruba. What are your views on that then? You know, are we thinking about multiculturalism or is it interculturalism when we raise that?
Yoruba has always been global in the first place, you know, because you know they're in our neighbors here in West Africa, and they don't speak English, they speak French, but common, we speak Yoruba common. Therefore, it's important that we speak a bit of French, you know, because of them. And then when we go into diaspora, into South America, for instance, people who are engaged actively in Yoruba language or culture, or Yoruba culture, they speak Portuguese. And then when you go to Cuba, for instance, they speak Spanish, but there's Yoruba practice. Anywhere there's Yoruba culture, then we need to be able to understand that most of the work that's been done, intellectual academic work in Yoruba and in South America has been done in the Ifa signatures, the Odus, Yoruba, but they're using Portuguese. That's why it's important for us, you know, to encourage our children to take either French, the English is one, then French or Portuguese, you know, or Spanish. So what binds us together is Yoruba culture.
So I think what you're saying there as well, we need to be open to learning not just our language. So we can't be isolated as a cultural microcosm. We need to embrace other non-Yoruba cultures, other non-Nigerian cultures to be truly global and truly international. I'm just conscious of time. We've overrun already by 10 minutes. I noticed we've got 2 more questions, and that's all we're going to take. So we've got a question from Femi. So we'll take Femi's question. And then we'll take a question from Ademola, and then I think we'll have to call it a wrap. If you have any other questions, just send us an email. We'll put this to the panelists. We can respond to you offline. But we don't want to keep you beyond another 10 minutes. We can help it. So let's start with Femi. Just in just a few seconds. What's your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. It's not a question. It's just more like a remark. I think in terms of responsibility, I think it's general responsibility, the government, the policymakers, as well as the private sector as well. I think I think knowing more about what Kola Tibosun has done, he has worked so much with the public sector to ensure that there is so much influence of Yoruba in everything that we do. Like, for example, I think he worked on the Google apps whereby, you know, they integrated Yoruba, you know, method of pronunciation into it. So it's a holistic approach rather than just saying it's just the parents or the family or the government. Everyone has to be involved in it.
Absolutely, thanks. And I think there's lots of good work being done, not just by Kola in relation to the Yoruba language, but also people are working on the Igbo language and other languages as well. So I think, just all you need to do is Google and you'll find a lot of resources on the internet. The next question then from Ademola A.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yeah. Hello, Ademola.
Thank you. Hi. So similar to Femi, mine also is just a comment, is a word of encouragement. I posted earlier on that I live in Illinois, for example, and I learned so much about, who I am as a Yoruba person actually from, the time I moved to America than when I was in Nigeria, for example, because, the narrative that for example, my dad, never encouraged, the utilization of English language as a means of communication, because what he had learned, and that's why earlier on I was speaking about the importance of, the philosophical ideologies that drive our education, because what he had learned was that, embracing, Yoruba language or your L1 was going to mess up your English. And since English is seen as one of the primary languages that we use in, doing research and doing anything that is intellectually sophisticated, so he thought, because I didn't want to, do anything that was going to mess up, education is seen by most parents as an opportunity for you to climb on the social ladder. So he thought that if, not doing well in English language was going to limit your ability to engage in academic activities in school, then I didn't want to take that opportunity away from you. So it was not actually, I didn't even learn the meaning of my name, Ademola, until when I was in my late teens, for example. And I spent, the first 20 years or so of my life in Nigeria before I moved to America. Wow. So I think the importance of, so when Bemi and I think Uzo, we're talking about how it is that, Yoruba language or local languages are criminalized in the falls of the classroom. I'm a living witness of that as well. So, so I just wanted to encourage, and I think it was Kola Tubasu made a great point about NP. My background is in education, and I'm studying for my PhD in education right now. So I do a lot of work, around issues of identity and all that. For example, before I left Nigeria, I knew that English was one of the, I think, 2 subjects that you needed to pass for you to write the college entrance exam, the UTME. Why can't we make any of our L1s one of the subjects that you needed to pass for you to be qualified to our UTME? That's one question I asked myself. Why do I have so I knew back then that if you did well in all other subjects like economics, accountancy, if you didn't pass English, you were not qualified to take the UTME, for example. Why can't we make English language? Why can't we make Igbo, Ibibio, for example, our own English language? So as much as I'm not the kind of person who, I don't abdicate responsibility. Like I was telling you, I've been blessed with 2 beautiful girls. One of them is Ishaolua, right? And she speaks Yoruba. And I think I communicated, with Baby Sola, on LinkedIn that, I want to say thank you. So Ishaolua speaks Yoruba. She knows to say go. She knows to say come. So my wife and I needed to have that intentional conversation, because I was not going to pass on that cultural deficiency to my, my posterity. So it was a conscious determination that my wife and I meant to say, hey, this was a deficiency in a way that our parents passed on to us, but what can we do? So which is why, as much as I think collaboratively that definitely, we need all of the, many pieces, many of the social agents working together, but I think we cannot, underplay the importance of parents, because we spend so much time interacting with our kids, and as most of all know, the home is the primary, agent of social, institutionalization. So I just want to encourage as many of us who are parents, either biological parents or, you act in a capacity as a mentor or mentee to someone, to, understand that the role you play is very, very important. And I don't know if Bimisola and Buki, the teams at your team at Culture Tree, if you're looking to collaborate with people, I'll be glad to volunteer my time, my experience, and whatever I have to ensure that, we'll continue to, make this push, for restoring the dignity of the African culture and the African, epistemological perspective. Thank you so much
Ademola, thanks very much for that. I think, you raise a very good point in that, we should teach our children the little that we know, even if it's a little, and then build from there. And yet, by all means, send us an email, send Bemi and or an email, and we'll be happy to have a chat around how we can pull our resources together. I did say we only had time for 2 more questions.
We have just
but,
one question there.
Is it one more? So I can see Uju waving frantically. So we'll put you back on it. Be ashamed. And then also and Lara. So we'll take Uju and Lara, and then Lara Shonoiki, and then that's
Wait,
it.
TK is signaling something. TK is signaling.
TK, yes. Mm-hmm.
No, before we just go off this session, I want to mention something that's at my backyard. I think we have to recognize the importance of Nollywood. We have to encourage the making of indigenous films, more indigenous films, because this now is going to be our, can we say, more interaction everywhere now that everything is online. I think we must never forget the importance of our film industry in Nigeria, the film industry to produce more indigenous films to mediate in this deficiency.
Absolutely. So let's go back. Let's go to Lara Shonoiki to start, and then we'll finish with Uju, because we lost Uju earlier, didn't we? So let's start with you, Lara Shonoiki.
The husband.
You're muted now. Go ahead.
So it's me, Toyin, the husband, Shinoki. I'd like to commend Culture Tree for what you've done so far. We're really very grateful. Really appreciate it. But in terms of language, I think also what we need to emphasize on moving forward would be the history of how we got here in the first place. I think that growing up in Nigeria, I think that was really missing. For me, I learned a lot about the African history, Yoruba culture in England and in the States. How did we get to this point where a foreign language became our own native language? That's never been explained to me. We need to begin to explain, we need to understand our history, what transpired in the last 500 years, how we got here, the history of Africa in the ancient times, what we did, knowing all those great civilizations like the Dogon people and the others. I think it's very important for African kids to understand their history, the greatness of the ancient African cultures, right? I think it's very important. It's really affected me profoundly. I have a scar on my hand. I was beaten for speaking my own language in a class in Nigeria.
Oh, wow.
It says stop speaking vernacular. This is a scar.
Wow, okay.
So we have to go back to all this. How did we get to this point where, and it's not only us Anglophone people, Francophone is the same. You go to like Côte d'Ivoire or Togo, you find the elites speaking French, acting French. You go to Angola, the elites there speak Portuguese, act Portuguese. We have to begin to ask these questions. How did Africa get to this point? It's never been explained to us.
And you say that because by understanding with the past, we can make sense of the present and then help us move forward.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Everything about the African culture is being considered inferior, including our religions.
Yes.
We have to begin to take pride in our religions. I know it's to be political, and also our languages as well.
Yeah. Okay, no, that's great. Thanks for that. Yeah. And a final question from Uju. Uju. There we go. Hi, Uju. Go ahead. What's your question?
Yeah, okay, so it's not a question really. I'm trying to contribute. We're talking about, language being the vehicle for transmitting our culture, and I agree totally. The fact that, UNESCO thinks it's important for us to do that is something that is appalling to me. I work with National Institute for Cultural Orientation, NICO, and we have a training institute, and all we do, our responsibility is to promote, protect and preserve our culture and heritage. So we have run classes for indigenous languages, we run classes for belief systems in Nigeria, we run classes for traditional medicine and all that, okay? And these are things that I think we can benefit from, even with our kids, when we have holiday classes. So if we want to do this, I believe that it's something, first of all, to have interest in it, and then we can move on. For parents who don't know how to speak the language, I think it's pretty simple what we can do. You can, get people that know how to speak it. When you have family gatherings and all, just to speak gradually. Start from greetings, or what does a child say to the parents when they finished eating in your language? Something as simple as that. My bag, my book, my pen, my eyes, my nose. Just gradually. Good morning. How do they say it in your language? I have children that I teach Igbo because I'm also an Igbo teacher. What I got to what I did with them that gave them, the zeal and the push they have now. I tried to, just because they're very intelligent. And I said, how about if you come to your school now and someone wants to give a scholarship? I know that if I ask you to apply, you're going to ace everything. But what if they say that this person is coming from a so and so place, and you're Igbo, and they said, okay, Igbo people are organizing this thing, and the first thing you have to know is to know how to speak Igbo before we start looking at your academic performance. You want to go in? They were like, yes, now, yes. That was what I said to them. And since then, we start the class with Igbo songs, we end the class with Igbo songs, and they're very excited because they want to know. Because it's our identity, really. And we can't go anywhere without these languages. Even when you want to talk, I'm also open to foreign cultures, really, because, Bemi is Yoruba, right? But I believe Bemi would want to talk to me if I come and say, hey, Baoni, somehow I'll get her attention by saying Baoni, because it means I identify with her own culture. So we'll start with ours, and then we'll move on to other people. We must be cultural tolerance. We just have to be. That's the way to move forward in everything. Just like Baba TK said, cultural diplomacy is the way to go, and language is a part of it. Everything you have to do to exchange your culture with people. So I'm very happy and excited we are having this conversation. And I think we should have more of it. And please, let's just start by speaking. Anything is good. Just start with saying hello, hi. Thank you, everyone, for giving me the opportunity. Thank you so much. I think I'll stop now.
Great, thank you. I can see Uka waving and saying thanks. So I guess in the interest of time, we've got to love you and leave you. I'll just hand over to Bemi to give us a run through the closing steps and what next. Yes,
it's been an amazing webinar, honestly. Even I've taken quite a lot of notes there from listening to all our three panelists, PK, Professor Hua, and Ukamaka. I'm so grateful for you for accepting our invitation to join this webinar. PK, you've had a lot of chats in our little chat room. There are people commending you for your work. You're a national treasure, and we really appreciate you for coming on board and sharing your thoughts and insights with us. Professor Duha, we thank you very much for bringing your academic insight into this conversation. We will be working together with you to glean more, into how we can go about and looking at the research and seeing how we can actually make use of the data that you have. So thank you very much for coming on board. And Ukamaka, thank you so much for bringing your contribution to this. Your stories about, identity markers and being able to know who you are by just, your name and your language has been really insightful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you. For everybody joining us on this conversation, thank you very much for taking the time. We appreciate you taking the call. And I just wanted to say that we've been recording this conversation, and it will be available on our website by next week. And we have a part 2 coming up next month. So we have at the moment 26th of June. That might change, but we have it's a 3-part series, and we're continuing conversation with other speakers who will be bringing some more insight into the conversation. So please register for that as well. We'll send some more information to you all for the next conversation. And if you have any questions, or if you couldn't get through to everybody, I think we did get through to everybody, but if we haven't, and you remember something, please send us an email at info@culturetree.co.uk, and we'll get back to you on that. So finally, thank you so much for joining us on this call, and we hope to see you next month.
Yeah, just maybe one final thing. Someone just said they'd like to keep the conversation going. Well, with everyone who's been on the call, everyone who's registered, we'll have a think about the best platform to do that, because we'd like to keep that going, and we'll be in touch with you via email to join that conversation. Yeah. So yes, thank you very much, everyone, and goodbye from me too. Yes.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Yeah. Bye.